Hi, welcome back to ITC568. Today we're going to have a look at assignment 5, have a bit of guidance on that. So assignment 5 is on a security, privacy and data sovereignty strategy. It's worth 20% and it's due the 18th of October. 4,000 words plus or minus 10%. So this is a scenario we've developed for this one is the current COVID scenario. As you know, it's caused considerable angst and disruption in many countries. And so what we're looking at is the individual tracking approach for this particular scenario. So for this scenario, you've been engaged by Department of Health to advise on the development of privacy and data protection for COVID-safe app users. So Health expect up to 16 million Australian mobile users to download and use this particular app. And they've also announced in the scenario that they're going to use a major US-based public cloud provider to host that COVID-safe data, but that they claim the data will always be under Australian government control. So, as we know, there's a number of different countries have developed mobile phone apps that track people and their movements. Some examples here, there are more, but Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, Australia. In the assignment itself, there are links to each of those. I didn't include those here just for room's sake. Also, Google and Apple have developed a joint initiative to do contact tracing on both the Android and iOS operating systems for their particular phones. So again, there's a link there for that for you to have a look at. ScienceMag.org has also put a link up there which discusses phone tracking in some more detail and gives some more of the technical issues and reasoning behind it. So these are the background things that you'll need to read, and then you may well find more information, particularly about stuff that does or doesn't work, and you may or may not want to look at the UK in reference to that. So to the tasks at hand, you have 4 tasks, the first of which is to write a report that discusses the possible threats and risks to the security of user data on a mobile phone from the use of COVID-safe app. And this is particularly in relation to linked cloud and financial accounts. So this is where you've got to start thinking about what you have to have in a strategy to protect user data on their phone with a COVID-safe app that is going to transfer data into the cloud. So you've got to start to think about any particular threats and risks to the data sets that are currently on the phone. What sort of controls could you use to mitigate those threats? So to report on this, you need to write a report for each of them. So you're looking at a single document with a maximum word count of 4,000 words, plus or minus 10%. So in this section of the report, you should describe the risks and threats that you've identified, your strategy, and how your proposed controls will work. And if you can give some examples, that would be really good. Question 2 asks you to describe the possible threats to the privacy of the user's data and location, user's data, location, and activities from the use of this app. So this is now where you could think about what's the strategy protecting citizens' health and PII data, as well as their location data and their activity data that could also be uploaded to the cloud, because as we are aware, some of that will be. So again, what are the threats and risks to these particular sets of data? What type of controls are you going to use to mitigate those threats? Again, this section of the report, you need to put in that Word document with that maximum word count of 4,000 words, plus or minus 10%. So in this section, you talk about these particular threats and risks, your strategy to combat them, and your proposed controls. And again, if you can give some examples, that would be really handy. Question 3 is the more interesting one, where you discuss the issues of data sovereignty that may apply to the storage of COVID-safe data in the US-based cloud storage. So this is where you've got to consider what should be in a strategy to ensure data sovereignty for health and PII data in the cloud. What are the data sovereignty threats and issues to this particular data set? How would you mitigate those? So again, that goes into a section of the report. You talk about the issues, your strategy, your controls. If you've got some examples there, that would be really good. Finally, you are to do a recommendation section, and this is where you will recommend initially, the first one, some possible security controls to prevent the loss or breach of user data while still enabling effective tracking, and the reasons that these controls would be effective. So first one, security controls to prevent loss and breach of user data. The second recommendation is around privacy controls to protect user privacy, particularly around data location and activities, while still enabling effective tracking of COVID-19 contacts and so forth. And again, your reasoning as to why these controls would be effective. Third, some controls to ensure that the COVID-safe data remains under Australian data sovereignty and control. And again, your reasoning why you think these controls will be effective. So this is where you now need to condense those strategies back down into a series of recommendations. And your recommendations must be accompanied by the reasoning to state why they are effective, why you think they will be effective. And again, the whole document should be a single document, 4,000 words or thereabouts, plus or minus 10%, and of course references are always an addition to the word count. Okay, so again, we're coming at this from the approach of a senior advisor to management. You've got to be aware of the technical details, because now you're looking at trying to develop specific strategies for a tool. And you know in advance the tool is going to have data stored in the public cloud, the tool is going to access other data on a phone, and we've got to be careful about what is going to be stored and how it's going to be stored. So your task here is to craft strategies to protect that PII data, the health data, and all the other user data in the app, so that management can make informed decisions and then advise government. So of course, like all other presentations to management, it needs to be concise, accurate, provide the additional material and references if required, make a logical argument, and provide recommendations that proceed directly from your arguments. And in case you think I've mixed up by using presentation instead of report, in this case, it's the same thing, right? Finally, we've got an example here of a real-world problem that continues to plague governments right around the world to this current minute. The idea of having a single app that can simplify the problems of contract tracing is a really fascinating idea. Keeping this data safe is the problem that you've got to start to consider. So you've got to start to research and argue a series of strategies for the senior management of Department of Health to adopt. And again, this is another essential step in the way in which we start to think about the process of securing data and privacy in the cloud. So once more, I've dropped you into a fairly contemporary problem that has considerable issues to be considered. So I think this will give you something really interesting to research and consider, and it will certainly help you to start thinking about just exactly how do you put these together and approach them in an enterprise. I hope you enjoy it. It's, as I said, a real world one, although not one we would like to see continue. But good luck.